Greetings all you movie junkies and entertainment lovers. Today we're going to be going through one of my favorite movie franchises of all time, King Kong. Yes, we're going to be ranking all of the King Kong films. Even though King Kong has been around for over 90 years now, there's only been about 9 live action feature films that have featured the character. And for me, this is going all the way back to my childhood. Probably one of my favorite, film series, film characters of all time. And I've done several other videos on the channel talking about it, but I've never really sat down and actually thought about, which ones do I prefer, what order would I put them in. So I'm going to rank all of the films from least to best, and it's important to remember, as I always point out, that this is just my personal list of the way that I would rank all of the King Kong films. So starting off right at the bottom of the barrel at number 9, we have Son of Kong. Yes, the original sequel to the original film, just simply made to cash in on the success of the original film. It was completely rushed into production. It came out like just a couple months later. I think it's terrible. It's really the only one of these films that I actually don't like at all. Maybe had I seen this when I was younger, I would have enjoyed it more. I only watched it for the first time a couple years ago, and I just did not find anything to like about it at all. I know a lot of other people say that it's supposed to be kind of a comedy, but it's just not funny in any ways. Of all the films, it's the only one that I don't actually own or care to watch again. So for me, right at the bottom of the barrel at number 9 is Son of Kong. And now at number 8, we have King Kong Lives. Yes, the sequel to the 1976 remake. I'm not going to talk too much about it because I do plan on doing a proper review of it at some point in the future. All I would say for now is that I do think that this movie has always been kind of underrated. I don't think that it's anywhere near as bad as people make it out to be. Now, do I think it's a masterpiece? No, but it is definitely a bit of a guilty pleasure of mine. The effects, for the most part, are really, really great. There's definitely some tonal issues here and there, but again, like I said, I'm not going to go too in depth on it because I want to talk more about it in the future. But all I will say is that I think it's an underrated film, but still, the second least of all the films. So that's King Kong Lives at number 8. At number 7, we have King Kong Escapes. I've always really enjoyed this movie quite a bit. I know not everybody's a fan of these sort of Toho era Kong films. I will say that, the look of Kong in both of those movies, including this one, is not particularly great. When people compare, effects of old movies, like films like this, like King Kong Escapes, which came out in the late 60s, and they compare it to the effects of stuff today, it doesn't look as good or whatever. It's like you can't compare effects from old movies to those of today, because obviously the ones today are going to be better because, the technology is different, the world is different. When I watch a movie, say, like this, an old science fiction movie from the 1960s, I will compare its effects to the other films of that time period, and that applies to every single movie from every time period, is that you should always just compare the effects or critique the effects to the other effects of that time period. But even that said, I think that, that the Kong suit in this is pretty terrible. I mean, from far away, the head I think was a lot better than it was King Kong versus Godzilla, but overall, just the eyes look terrible. You can see kind of like the zipper on the back of it in some shots. The Mecha Kong, on the other hand, is really, really impressive and works really well. The Gorosaurus, I love the miniature effects, and overall, this movie is just a lot of fun. It definitely has kind of a James Bond feel to it. It's a lot of fun. The ending's great on the tower and everything. It's a lot of fun, and I enjoy it quite a bit. So that's King Kong Escapes at number 7. And then at number 6, we have King Kong vs. Godzilla, the original 1963 version. Is this a perfect movie? No, but man, is it fun. At the end of the day, this will always be the original, even though it might not be, the greatest effects ever. For the time, it was, still pretty impressive. For some reason, Toho just could not figure out how to do Kong correctly because he does not particularly look great. But personally, I don't mind it too much. Sort of some of the janky effects and stuff are kind of part of the charm of some of these older movies. You come for, the battles, with Kong and Godzilla, and there's so many great moments in this, and I have such fond memories of watching this when I grew up. So that's King Kong vs. Godzilla at number 6. And then at number 5, we have the 1976 remake. This is probably the most divided of all the King Kong films. A lot of people really love this movie. A lot of people really don't like this movie. I've always really liked this film a lot. I think that as far as remakes go, I think this is really great. Very much, reflects the sort of time period that it was set in. And it very much is a film of its time, but that is something that I say that it is of its time in a good way. I think that's kind of what makes this film great. Definitely, again, much like King Kong Lives, I want to do, a proper sort of review of it at some point. So I won't go too in depth on it, but I've always thought that it's a great film. I think that it has a lot of, really interesting ideas and elements that aren't really talked about as much. And overall, I think it's a great film. I've watched it dozens of times, and I would definitely watch it dozens more times in the future. So that's King Kong 1976 at number 5. It was kind of difficult, deciding between this and the last one. But at number 4, we have Kong Skull Island. Yes, Kong's glorious entry into the monsterverse. And I think if you're a fan of giant monsters, or if you're a fan of kaiju films, then it's a good chance that you're a fan of the monsterverse. And this, as far as introductions go, was really great. And it definitely borrows a lot of elements from the 1976 Kong, considering the time period that it is set in. And overall, the whole look and feel of this one is really great. I wasn't the biggest fan of it the first time I saw it, but it's definitely grown on me. I've watched it a bunch of times, but weirdly enough, it still is kind of probably my least favorite of the MonsterVerse films. It's just an overall great movie. So that's Kong Skull Island at number 4. And then at number 3, this was difficult to decide between these last two, but at number 3, I gotta go Godzilla versus Kong. Yeah, it was kind of tough to decide between this and Kong Skull Island, but I think I just prefer this a little bit more. Getting to see, Kong and Godzilla finally share the screen again after like 60 years or whatever it was since the original film. Man, oh man, was it, worth the wait. I mean, all the stuff with the battles is definitely the highlight of this movie. One thing that did kind of disappoint me about it a little bit was the fact that they kind of went for an all killer no filler attitude, where they pretty much cut down on the exposition and plot as much as they could, which does make for a very watchable movie. But somebody who's a big fan of these characters in the monsterverse and everything, that I would have definitely helped to have a little bit more exposition and, explain certain things, especially with like the Hollow Earth and stuff. But instead, we're kind of waiting for other movies to, explain things and stuff, which is not always, the best sign of good storytelling. That's just me personally. At the end of the day, the thing that we come to these movies for, the things we watch these movies for, are the big monster battles. And those parts of the movie were fantastic. So that's Godzilla vs. Kong at number 3. This is probably going to be controversial. But at number 2, we have the original 1933 King Kong, one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. If there's one film that I think should be considered the greatest film of all time, it's probably this one, because of how much it has done for modern cinema and how incredibly advanced it was for the time that it was set in. And so I certainly don't need to give it any more praise than it's already gotten. I used to love watching it growing up, but it was not my first experience with Kong, as I'm sure most of you know. So it just kind of slightly got beat out for me. But I mean, it pretty much came down to this and number 1. Pretty much I like both equally, but yeah, just the other one just slightly beat it. So at number 1, we have Peter Jackson's King Kong, which to me is probably like the greatest remake of all time. And for the reason I kind of put it over the original, really is honestly just for personal reasons alone, personal impact. I saw the original one after I saw the Peter Jackson Kong. If you've seen my review, if you've seen me talk about it in other places, it is just probably my personal all-time favorite film. A lot of that is just for personal reasons. It was really kind of the one that kind of really made me cinephile for life, that kind of began my journey on films, and it was really the first film I watched where I felt like I got transported into the world that it was set in. If it wasn't for Peter Jackson's Kong, I wouldn't be, a fan of all the other movies to begin with. So that's why I put it at number 1. There you go, guys. That was my list, ranking all the King Kong films from least to best. Feel free to jump in the comments down below and let me know what order you would put all the films in. And yeah, so thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe for more videos. And until next time, be sure to consume as much entertainment as humanly possible. And I will see you in the next video.